The moment the One Ring was destroyed in the fiery depths of Mount Doom marked a decisive and unparalleled victory in the history of Middle-earth. It was the culmination of a struggle that had lasted for millennia, during which Sauron, the Dark Lord, had instilled fear and despair across the lands. With the ring's annihilation, Sauron's physical form and seemingly unassailable power were also obliterated, leading to one of the most intriguing questions that fans and scholars alike have pondered. Where did Sauron go when the One Ring was destroyed? Was his dark essence completely obliterated, or did it find refuge in some shadowy corner of the cosmos? In this exploration, we delve into the intricate lore of Middle-earth to unravel the mystery of what might have become of one of its most infamous figures after the ring's destruction. To truly understand Sauron's fate following the destruction of the One Ring, one must first delve into the nature of his power and the profound significance of the ring itself. Sauron was far from being an ordinary being. He was a Maya, a member of an ancient race of powerful and immortal spirits created by Eru Ilúvatar, the supreme deity in J.R.R. Tolkien's Legendarium. The Maiar were lesser Ainur, angelic beings who existed before the creation of the world and played pivotal roles in shaping it. Sauron, originally known as Mairon, was among the greatest of the Maiar, renowned for his intelligence, cunning, and an intense desire for order and perfection in all things. It was these qualities that initially made him a respected figure, but they also sowed the seeds for his eventual fall into darkness. Sauron's descent into evil began when he was seduced by the power and ideology of Morgoth, the first Dark Lord who sought to dominate and corrupt the world. Under Morgoth's tutelage, Sauron became a master of deceit, manipulation, and treachery, gradually falling deeper into the abyss of evil. After Morgoth's defeat at the end of the First Age, Sauron assumed his master's mantle, rising as the new Dark Lord of Middle-earth. However, unlike Morgoth, whose power was vast and innate, Sauron's power was intricately bound to the physical world, particularly through the creation of the One Ring. The One Ring was Sauron's most ambitious and perilous creation, forged in secret within the fires of Mount Doom. Its creation was not merely for the purpose of controlling the other rings of power, but also as a vessel into which Sauron poured a significant portion of his own strength, will, and malice. This act was both the source of his immense power and his critical vulnerability. By embedding so much of his essence into the ring, Sauron rendered himself nearly invincible as long as the ring existed. However, this also meant that his continued existence and power were inexorably linked to the fate of the ring. The act of binding his essence to a physical object was a double-edged sword, as it made Sauron's immortality dependent on the survival of the ring. Through the One Ring, Sauron achieved dominion over the other ring-bearers and extended his influence across Middle-earth. The ring magnified his natural abilities, making him an almost unstoppable force while it remained intact. Yet, this act of immense power also created a paradoxical situation. While the ring was the very source of his might, it also became the linchpin of his potential downfall. Sauron's power was no longer wholly his own. It was shared with and contained within the ring, making him vulnerable in ways that other Maiar were not. This profound connection between Sauron and the One Ring set the stage for his eventual defeat, intertwining the destruction of the ring with the destruction of Sauron's power and, ultimately, his very essence. The moment when the One Ring was destroyed is arguably the most pivotal event in the entire history of Middle-earth. When Frodo Baggins, against all odds, brought the ring to the fires of Mount Doom, he found himself unable to let it go, as the ring's overwhelming power and allure seized hold of his will. However, fate, in the form of Gollum, intervened. Gollum, driven by his obsessive desire for the ring, bit off Frodo's finger to seize the ring for himself. In his ecstatic moment of triumph, Gollum lost his footing and fell into the fiery chasm, taking the ring with him. As the ring was consumed by the flames, it was unmade, and with it the power it held over Sauron was irrevocably shattered. At the exact moment of the ring's destruction, a cataclysmic reaction swept through the realms of Middle-earth. Sauron's physical form, which had already been reduced to a shadowy, almost intangible figure after he lost the ring long ago, was utterly obliterated. The Dark Tower of Barad-dûr, Sauron's fortress and the epicenter of his might, which had stood as an imposing symbol of his dominion for centuries, collapsed into ruin. The armies of Sauron, bound to his will through the ring's power, were thrown into disarray and swiftly defeated. The Nazgûl, Sauron's most powerful and feared servants who were inextricably bound to the ring, were consumed by the flames of Mount Doom as their master's power disintegrated into nothingness. The destruction of the One Ring did more than annihilate Sauron's physical manifestation. It severed his connection to the material world entirely. Without the ring, Sauron could no longer exert his will or influence over Middle-earth. His vast reserves of malice, fear, and power dissipated into the void, leaving him as little more than a faint, malevolent whisper in the shadows. The loss of the ring, which had been the very heart of his strength, meant that Sauron could no longer take physical form or project his will as he once had. His defeat was total and absolute, reducing his once dominant presence in Middle-earth to a mere memory, a fading shadow of the terror he had once embodied. Despite the destruction of Sauron's physical form, the question remains: what became of his spirit? As a Maya, Sauron was an immortal being, created by Eru Ilúvatar, and thus his essence could not be fully destroyed in the conventional sense. However, the catastrophic loss of the One Ring inflicted a mortal wound upon his spirit. The ring had been the vessel of much of his power, will, and malice, and with its destruction, Sauron's spirit was left in a state of impotence, fragmentation, and disarray. Tolkien's Legendarium suggests that while the destruction of the ring did not entirely erase Sauron's existence, it left him in a state of extreme powerlessness and spiritual disintegration. His spirit, no longer tethered to the physical realm or capable of influencing it in any meaningful way, was rendered into a form of exile. Unlike Morgoth, who was cast into the void by the Valar after his defeat in the First Age, Sauron's spirit did not face a formal banishment. Instead, he was left to wander the realms as a formless, weakened entity, unable to ever again take shape or wield any significant power. Sauron's spirit, now bereft of its primary source of power, likely became a disembodied force of malevolence, too weak to manifest in the world. This state of existence would be one of profound torment for a being like Sauron, who had once wielded so much power and had sought to dominate all life. His spirit, now reduced to a mere shadow, would have been trapped in a liminal space, neither fully present in the world nor entirely absent. It is conceivable that Sauron's spirit lingered in a state of perpetual despair and regret, forever aware of its defeat but utterly unable to act upon it. In Tolkien's mythology, the concept of evil is often tied to the idea of self-destruction. Sauron, in his insatiable lust for power and control, ultimately orchestrated his own downfall. The destruction of the ring was not just a physical defeat, but a profound metaphysical one. It signified the unraveling of all that Sauron had built and all that he had become. His spirit, now stripped of the physical and magical power it once wielded, was left as a hollow echo of its former self. This lingering spirit, though it may have continued to exist in some diminished form, was effectively neutralized, incapable of posing any further threat to Middle-earth. Thus, the fate of Sauron after the destruction of the One Ring can be seen as a form of eternal exile, a punishment befitting his long history of malice, domination, and the relentless pursuit of power. His spirit, while not wholly obliterated, was consigned to a fate far worse than death, an eternity of impotent existence, forever aware of its past power, but utterly unable to reclaim it. This was the final fitting end for the Dark Lord, who had once sought to bring all of Middle-earth under his rule. The ultimate fate of Sauron after the destruction of the One Ring has been a topic of much debate, speculation, and scholarly interpretation among fans and enthusiasts of J.R.R. Tolkien's work. While Tolkien's texts provide a clear narrative of Sauron's downfall, the specifics of what happened to his spirit after the ring's destruction remain shrouded in mystery, leaving room for various interpretations and theories. These theories range from the complete annihilation of Sauron's spirit to the idea that he was cast into the void, a concept that plays a significant role in Tolkien's broader mythology. By examining these different possibilities, we can gain a deeper understanding of the complexity of Tolkien's world and the nature of evil within it. One of the most widely accepted theories is that the destruction of the One Ring led to the complete obliteration of Sauron's power, reducing him to a mere shadow of his former self. This theory is grounded in the idea that Sauron, having poured so much of his essence into the ring, was rendered powerless when it was destroyed. In this view, Sauron's spirit, though technically immortal as a Maya, was so weakened and diminished that it became incapable of ever taking physical form again, or exerting any influence over the world. This interpretation aligns with Tolkien's portrayal of evil as ultimately self-destructive. Sauron, in his insatiable lust for power, created the very means of his own undoing. By tying his fate to the ring, he ensured that his downfall would be as total as it was inevitable. Supporters of this theory argue that Sauron's spirit, while still in existence, was reduced to a state of near non-being, a formless, powerless entity adrift in the remnants of its former self. In this state, Sauron would be eternally conscious of his defeat, but utterly incapable of reversing it. This would be a fate worse than death for a being like Sauron, who had once sought to dominate all of Middle-earth. The idea that Sauron's spirit lingers in a state of perpetual impotence fits with Tolkien's broader themes of hubris, the corruption of power, and the inevitable downfall of those who seek to dominate others. Another theory posits that Sauron's spirit was not merely diminished, but was cast into the void, a dark, empty space beyond the known world. The void, or the timeless halls, is a concept in Tolkien's mythology that represents the ultimate emptiness, a place outside of time and space where the most malevolent beings are banished. This theory draws on the fate of Morgoth, Sauron's former master, who was cast into the void by the Valar after his defeat in the First Age. Morgoth's banishment to the void was a punishment for his relentless pursuit of power, his corruption of the world, and his rebellion against the divine order. Some fans and scholars believe that Sauron, as Morgoth's lieutenant and successor, might have met a similar fate. However, the idea of Sauron being cast into the void is more speculative, as there is no explicit mention of such a fate in Tolkien's texts. Unlike Morgoth, who was defeated by the combined forces of the Valar in a great and cataclysmic battle, Sauron's downfall was brought about by the destruction of the One Ring, a more indirect and symbolic defeat. If Sauron's spirit was indeed cast into the void, it would imply a level of divine intervention similar to Morgoth's punishment. This theory suggests that the Valar, or perhaps even Eru Ilúvatar himself, might have intervened to ensure that Sauron could never rise again. The void, in this context, would serve as an eternal prison for Sauron, a place where his spirit would be trapped in eternal isolation, unable to escape or influence the world in any way. A third theory speculates that Sauron's spirit was not entirely obliterated or cast into the void, but instead remains in Middle-earth in a weakened and dispersed form. According to this view, Sauron's spirit, though shattered by the destruction of the ring, could still exist as a faint, malevolent presence, lingering in the darkest corners of the world. This theory draws on the idea that evil in Tolkien's world is never completely eradicated, but can be diminished and pushed to the fringes. Sauron's spirit, in this interpretation, would be a ghostly remnant of his former self, forever bound to the places where his influence was strongest, such as Mordor or the ruins of Barad-dûr. This lingering presence would be a shadow of the terror that Sauron once embodied, incapable of rallying the forces of evil or taking physical form, but still a source of fear, corruption, and despair. This theory resonates with Tolkien's depiction of evil as something that can never be fully destroyed, but can be diminished and resisted. Sauron's spirit, though weakened, would serve as a reminder of the past, a warning of the dangers of unchecked power and ambition. This idea also ties into the concept of evil as a corrupting force, suggesting that Sauron's influence, though no longer dominant, could still have a subtle corrosive effect on the world, manifesting in the fears, hatreds, and conflicts that continue to arise in Middle-earth. A more symbolic interpretation of Sauron's fate suggests that his spirit represents the persistence of evil in the world, even after its greatest manifestations are defeated. In this view, Sauron's downfall marks the end of his direct influence over Middle-earth, but the legacy of his actions and the evil he represented continues to linger in the hearts and minds of those who lived through his reign. This interpretation aligns with Tolkien's broader themes of the cyclical nature of history and the ongoing struggle between good and evil. Sauron's spirit, in this symbolic sense, would be the embodiment of the ever-present potential for corruption and darkness in the world. Even after his defeat, the shadow of Sauron remains, not as a literal presence, but as a reminder of the dangers of power, the consequences of greed, and the importance of vigilance against evil. This theory emphasizes the idea that Sauron's true defeat lies not in his destruction, but in the triumph of the forces of good that resisted him. The destruction of the One Ring symbolizes the victory of hope, courage, friendship, and selflessness over the forces of greed, domination, and despair. In this sense, Sauron's spirit, though it may persist in some form, is ultimately powerless in the face of the resilience, strength, and unity of the people of Middle-earth. This interpretation suggests that the true legacy of Sauron's defeat is not the lingering presence of his spirit, but the enduring strength, hope, and unity of those who opposed him. Each of these theories offers a different perspective on the fate of Sauron after the destruction of the One Ring, reflecting the complexity of Tolkien's world and the multifaceted nature of evil. Whether Sauron's spirit was completely annihilated, cast into the void, left to linger as a diminished presence, or interpreted as a symbolic representation of ongoing evil, the end of Sauron marks a profound and transformative moment in the history of Middle-earth. It serves as a stark reminder of the consequences of unchecked ambition, the corrupting influence of power, and the ultimate futility of evil. In the end, Sauron's fate, like much of Tolkien's work, leaves room for interpretation, reflection, and ongoing exploration, inviting readers and viewers to delve deeper into the meanings and implications behind the story and its characters. The defeat of Sauron and the destruction of the One Ring marked not only the end of an era of terror in Middle-earth, but also the beginning of a new age, an age in which the remnants of his influence would still be felt, and his dark legacy would continue to cast a long and ominous shadow over the world. The impact of Sauron's defeat was profound, reshaping the political, social, and cultural landscape of Middle-earth for generations to come. In the immediate aftermath, Middle-earth entered a period of renewal, restoration, and healing. But the scars left by Sauron's reign were deep and enduring, and the echoes of his malevolence would continue to influence the world in subtle and sometimes insidious ways. One of the most immediate and visible consequences of Sauron's defeat was the collapse of his vast empire. Sauron's power had extended across much of Middle-earth, with his influence felt in lands as far away as the Shire. His armies, which included orcs, trolls, and men from the east and south, were formidable, and their presence had long threatened the free peoples of Middle-earth. With the destruction of the One Ring, Sauron's control over these forces was irrevocably broken, leading to chaos, disarray, and eventual defeat among his troops. The armies of Mordor, which had seemed invincible while under Sauron's direct command, were suddenly leaderless, disoriented, and vulnerable. Without Sauron's will to direct them, these armies were swiftly defeated by the combined forces of the free peoples during the final battles of the War of the Ring. The fall of Barad-dûr, Sauron's Dark Tower, symbolized the collapse of his dominion over Middle-earth. The once imposing fortress, which had loomed menacingly over the plains of Gorgoroth, was reduced to rubble, and with it, the central seat of Sauron's power was destroyed. Mordor, a land that had long been synonymous with darkness, despair, and fear, was left in ruins. In the years following Sauron's defeat, the land of Mordor was gradually reclaimed, purified, and healed. The once barren and desolate plains began to show signs of life as nature slowly returned to the region, bringing with it the promise of renewal and hope. The destruction of Barad-dûr also freed the lands and peoples who had been under Sauron's oppressive rule, allowing them the chance to rebuild their lives, their societies, and their cultures. The liberation of Gondor and the restoration of its throne were among the most significant and far-reaching outcomes of Sauron's defeat. Gondor, long a bastion of resistance against the forces of darkness, had been severely weakened and nearly overwhelmed by Sauron's relentless attacks. The kingdom had lost much of its former glory, and its people had suffered greatly under the constant threat of war and destruction. However, with Sauron's fall, Gondor was able to reclaim its strength, its dignity, and its rightful place as a leading power in Middle-earth. Aragorn, the rightful heir to the throne, was crowned as King Elessar, and under his wise and just rule, Gondor entered a period of renewal, resurgence, and restoration. The ancient city of Minas Tirith, which had withstood the brutal siege of Sauron's armies, became a symbol of hope, resilience, and enduring strength. Its white walls gleaming as a beacon of light in a world that was slowly recovering from the shadows of darkness. Aragorn's reign marked the beginning of the Fourth Age, also known as the Age of Men. With the departure of the elves from Middle-earth, the dominion of men was fully established, and they began to shape the world according to their own visions, desires, and aspirations. The Fourth Age was a time of great change, transformation, and rebuilding, as the peoples of Middle-earth sought to restore what had been lost, to heal the wounds of the past, and to forge a new future free from the shadow of Sauron. Aragorn's leadership, characterized by wisdom, justice, compassion, and humility, played a crucial role in guiding this new era. He worked tirelessly to strengthen alliances between the kingdoms of men, to foster peace and understanding among the different peoples of Middle-earth, and to ensure that the hard-won lessons of the past were not forgotten, but were instead passed down to future generations. While the immediate aftermath of Sauron's defeat was marked by celebration, relief, and hope for the future, the legacy of his long and tyrannical reign was not easily erased or forgotten. The scars of his tyranny, both physical and psychological, were visible across Middle-earth, from the devastated lands of Ithilien and Rohan to the burned and scarred fields of the Shire. The psychological impact of Sauron's long shadow could be felt in the fears, memories, and lingering traumas of those who had lived through the War of the Ring. For many, the wounds inflicted by Sauron's terror ran deep, and the process of healing, rebuilding trust, and restoring a sense of normalcy would take time, patience, and collective effort. Communities that had been divided by war, suspicion, and fear had to rebuild bonds of trust, solidarity, and cooperation. The free peoples, though victorious, were left with a daunting task of ensuring that such a dark and destructive force could never rise again to threaten the peace and stability of Middle-earth. One of the most enduring and significant aspects of Sauron's legacy was the pervasive sense of vigilance that his defeat instilled in the peoples of Middle-earth. The war against Sauron had vividly demonstrated the devastating consequences of unchecked power, the insidious nature of evil, and the importance of unity, courage, and perseverance in the face of overwhelming darkness. As a result, the leaders of the free peoples, particularly Aragorn, were deeply committed to maintaining the peace, stability, and hard-won freedoms that had been achieved at such great cost. The vigilance was reflected in the continued watchfulness over the lands of Mordor and the surrounding regions, ensuring that no remnants of Sauron's influence could ever regain power or pose a threat to the free peoples of Middle-earth again. The cultural impact of Sauron's defeat was also profound and far-reaching. The stories of the War of the Ring, the heroism of figures like Frodo, Sam, Aragorn, and Gandalf, and the ultimate victory over the forces of darkness became the foundation of a new mythology for the peoples of Middle-earth. These tales of courage, sacrifice, friendship, and the triumph of good over evil were told and retold, becoming part of the collective memory, identity, and moral framework of the Fourth Age. The lessons learned from the war about the dangers of unchecked ambition, the corrupting influence of power, and the enduring strength of hope, compassion, and unity were passed down through generations, helping to shape the values, principles, and ethical codes of the New Age. Despite the triumph over Sauron, the shadow of his influence lingered in subtle and sometimes insidious ways. The memory of his tyranny served as a cautionary tale, a reminder of the potential for darkness within the hearts of men and the constant need for vigilance, humility, and moral integrity. The desire for power, the temptation to dominate others, and the fear of the unknown were all elements of Sauron's legacy that continued to challenge the leaders and peoples of the Fourth Age. Aragorn and his successors were keenly aware of these dangers, and their governance was marked by a commitment to humility, service, and the common good, qualities that stood in stark contrast to Sauron's reign of terror, domination, and unchecked ambition. In the Shire, the legacy of Sauron's defeat was felt in a more personal, immediate, and poignant way. The hobbits, who had long lived in peace, simplicity, and isolation, were drawn into the wider world by the events of the War of the Ring. Though the Shire itself was largely untouched by Sauron's direct influence, the hobbits' involvement in the war, particularly the extraordinary and perilous journey of Frodo and Sam, had a profound and lasting impact on their society, culture, and way of life. The return of the hobbits to the Shire was a bittersweet moment. While they brought back tales of their extraordinary adventures and heroic deeds, they also carried with them the burden of the traumas, losses, and sacrifices they had experienced along the way. The Scouring of the Shire, an event in which the hobbits had to reclaim their home from a corrupt and tyrannical regime, served as a microcosm of the larger struggle against Sauron, reinforcing the theme that even the smallest and most peaceful communities are not immune to the influence of evil, and that vigilance, courage, and unity are essential in the face of any threat. The restoration of the Shire, like the restoration of the wider world, was a process of healing, renewal, and the rebuilding of what had been lost. The hobbits, under the wise and compassionate leadership of figures like Frodo, Sam, Merry, and Pippin, worked tirelessly to rebuild their homes, their communities, and their way of life. However, the experiences of the war left a lasting and indelible mark on the Shire, changing the hobbits' perspective on the world beyond their borders and deepening their appreciation for the peace, simplicity, and beauty of their homeland. The memory of Sauron's shadow, though distant, served as a poignant reminder of the importance of protecting the peace, harmony, and simplicity of their lives from the ever-present dangers of power, greed, and corruption. The Red Book of Westmarch, which recorded the story of the War of the Ring and the extraordinary adventures of the hobbits, became a treasured document, preserving the history, lessons, and moral teachings of those dark times for future generations of hobbits to learn from and reflect upon. In the wider world, the defeat of Sauron also had profound and lasting implications for the other races of Middle-earth, particularly the dwarves and the elves. The dwarves, who had long been isolated in their mountain strongholds, began to emerge more fully into the world, seeking to rebuild their ancient halls, renew their connections with other races, and contribute to the new era of peace, prosperity, and rebuilding that followed Sauron's defeat. The elves, on the other hand, faced a period of transition, transformation, and gradual fading from the world. With the departure of many of their kin to the Undying Lands, those elves who remained in Middle-earth found themselves in a world increasingly dominated by men, and they gradually withdrew from the world's affairs, leaving behind only their legacy of beauty, wisdom, and sorrow. Ultimately, Sauron's defeat and the destruction of the One Ring marked a turning point in the history of Middle-earth. It was the end of an age dominated by the titanic struggle between light and darkness, and the beginning of a new era in which the free peoples were free to shape their own destinies, rebuild their lives, and forge a future of peace, hope, and renewal. However, the legacy of Sauron's long and tyrannical reign would continue to influence the world in myriad and sometimes subtle ways. The lessons learned from his tyranny, the vigilance required to prevent the rise of new evils, and the scars left by his long shadow would all play a crucial role in the unfolding story of Middle-earth, reminding future generations of the dangers of unchecked ambition, the corrupting influence of power, and the enduring strength of hope, courage, and unity. In the years and centuries that followed, the memory of Sauron, the War of the Ring, and the extraordinary deeds of those who fought against the darkness would become part of the myth, legend, and collective memory of Middle-earth, a distant but powerful reminder of the resilience, strength, and enduring spirit of the free peoples, and the ultimate triumph of hope, light, and good over despair, darkness, and evil. The defeat of Sauron was not just the end of a dark chapter in Middle-earth's history, but a testament to the enduring power of courage, friendship, and the belief that even in the darkest of times, there is always hope for renewal, healing, and a better future for all who inhabit the world of Middle-earth.